Well, I think you only have to look at the map of Europe and see Russian troops present in eastern Ukraine, to see the illegal annexation of Crimea, to recognize that there is a legitimate military threat that Russia represents. The military threat is only one aspect of Russia's troublesome behavior. If you look at election interference and other activities Russia has engaged in, there's clearly a challenge there. But I don't think you can reduce the transatlantic security challenges only to Russia. I think there are lots of other issues out there where the NATO community needs to be cooperating in order to ensure their own security.
Well, let's talk about some of those other threats, as you call them, or other risks to NATO. Donald Trump. He has consistently swiped against the alliance. How much of a threat do you think the US president is to NATO? I mean, he's a member. The US is a member. Are there forces from within that are troubling the alliance?
Well, I think if you look at what happened just over the course of the last 24 hours here in Washington, I think that the picture that conveys is of an extremely broad and deep bipartisan support for NATO. The NATO Secretary General appeared before a joint session of Congress and was welcomed with such warmth and such support that he was interrupted multiple times during his remarks with bipartisan applause.
The celebrations are quite low-key for this 70th birthday. There's a certain amount in the media of pessimism about these celebrations, ideas of the EU, the European countries turning inwards, the US administration, as we've said, taking sideswipes at NATO. How optimistic are you about the alliance's future? How relevant do you think it still is?
I still think it's quite relevant. It is. We started off talking about the military threat in Europe and how important it is to the United States that Europe not be dominated by an outside power, and that the United States work with like-minded countries, that is, our NATO allies, in order to vindicate our own security and that of our closest friends. So there is still a very clear reason for NATO to exist and a lot of support in the United States. I think that when you look at Europe, there is also a grudging acknowledgement that NATO is the best way to guarantee Europe's security. The discussions about possible strengthening or strategic autonomy, if you want to put it that way, are mostly predicated on a fear that the United States might disengage from European security. But that's not a desired outcome by anyone. It's more of a hedging strategy, I would argue. And quite frankly, it is one that would cost European countries, whether they are European Union member states or the other members of NATO in Europe, it would cost them many times more in defense spending than what they're currently aspiring to achieve. That is 2% of GDP by the year 2024. If Europe had to provide for its security alone, it would be spending perhaps 4% of its GDP, if not more, on defense. So this is a bargain for the United States. It's a bargain for Europe. And it is still the best way to ensure security for the transatlantic community, in my view. And I think that's a widely held sentiment here in the United States.
All right. Thank you very much. Great to talk to you, Jeff Rathke.